To some, $2 million is a dream. To SHEDEUR Sanders it was an insult. Not because the money wasn't enough, but because it came attached to a decades-old mindset that says young athletes should be grateful for crumbs. Sanders, guided by lessons from his father Dion and armed with a modern sense of value, said no. Instead, he chose a $100 million partnership with Nike, not for the check but for what it symbolizes.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
Belief in his own narrative. It's not just bold. It's personal. This decision marks a generational divide. Sanders isn't just playing football, he's playing the game behind the game. While critics question his humility, he's quietly forcing billion-dollar institutions to change their playbook. By prioritizing equity, creative control, and early independence, he's modeling a new kind of power. For the NFL, this isn't a player they can simply draft and mold. It's a signal that the era of passive rookies might be over, and the age of athlete CEOs has begun. $2 million. That's what the NFL put on the table for SHEDEUR Sanders. A rookie contract. Modest by professional sports standards. Life-changing for most. But SHEDEUR looked at it and without flinching said no. He didn't just walk away, he walked up. Straight into a $100 million deal with Nike. A deal that doesn't just pay him, it positions him. One that doesn't just see him as a player, but as a partner, an architect of culture, and a high-stakes signal that the old rules no longer apply. Because this isn't just about a football player making a business decision. This is a full-on challenge to the NFL's institutional power structure. And make no mistake, what SHEDEUR did shook it. For years, the NFL has operated under a very specific system. Draft the players, hand them their contracts, and keep the power at the top. Rookies don't call the shots. They take what they're given. The promise is, if you play well, if you prove yourself, if you fall in line, then the rewards come. SHEDEUR didn't accept that premise. He rejected the idea that value only comes after sacrifice. That an athlete's worth must be negotiated down until a team decides it can be built up. He flipped the script and said, my value exists now. And it's worth a lot more than what you're offering. And here's the part that hits hardest, he's right. SHEDEUR's brand power, social following, and media relevance already eclipse most rookies. That's not hype. That's business. That's reach, revenue, influence. That's something the league used to own. But not anymore. Because SHEDEUR isn't waiting to be made into a star by the NFL. He already is one. The Nike deal proves it. This wasn't some marketing gimmick. It was a calculated decision, by a global company, to attach itself to someone who doesn't just play the game, but represents where the game is going. And that deal. It reportedly includes far more than endorsement money. This is about creative input, ownership potential, long-term equity. Nike isn't paying SHEDEUR just to wear their logo, they're investing in him to help shape it. That move echoes a larger trend in how athletes are navigating business. It's no longer about being the face of a brand. It's about being in the brand. Controlling how it looks, how it speaks, and how it profits. SHEDEUR's already done this before. His deal with Gatorade had an equity clause built in. That alone puts him in a completely different category. He's not just a college athlete who stumbled into a payday. He's a calculated operator who understands how to leverage attention into ownership. This is what makes his rejection of the NFL so disruptive. Because he's not being arrogant. He's being informed. He knows that signing that $2 million rookie contract would have cost him more than money. It would have cost him leverage, narrative control, maybe even access to better opportunities down the line. And let's be honest, the NFL doesn't like when players do the math for themselves. Because for decades, the league has survived on players not knowing how much they're worth. Or worse, believing their value depends on approval from the system. But now, that illusion is breaking. Athletes today are walking into the room with data, reach, and brand equity. They don't need the NFL's marketing machine to become household names. They can build audiences directly. They can monetize directly. They can choose their platforms. That's what scares the league. Because if more players realize they don't need to be drafted to be valuable, the draft loses its power. If rookies realize they can make more by building their brand than signing their first contract, the whole pay structure collapses. And if companies like Nike keep offering these kinds of deals outside the league's control, the NFL loses its grip on the culture altogether. And let's not ignore the reaction. The backlash was immediate and revealing. Words like entitled and immature started getting thrown around. Pundits questioned his focus. Veterans like Chris Carter warned that moves like this could ruin careers. And what do all of those criticisms have in common? They assume that saying no to the NFL is inherently a mistake. That turning down a rookie contract must mean you're too full of yourself to appreciate what you've been offered. But what if it's the opposite? What if SHEDEUR appreciates his value too much to accept an outdated deal? That's the conversation no one wants to have. Because it means rethinking everything about how athletes are treated. It means asking whether the systems in place are really built to benefit the players, or just the people cashing in on them. And when the player in question is a young, confident black man who comes into the league with autonomy, the scrutiny multiplies. We've seen this before. Cam Newton was too loud. LeBron James was too controlling. Colin Kaepernick was too disruptive. There's a pattern. The second a black athlete starts operating with self-assurance, especially in business, the narrative shifts from praise to panic. But SHEDEUR's not playing into that. He's not apologizing for having leverage. He's not asking permission to do things differently. And he's not backing down just because it makes some people uncomfortable. He's walking into boardrooms with the same poise he brings to the pocket, and making decisions that protect his future, not just his next paycheck. Because here's what matters. This move wasn't impulsive. It was intentional. SHEDEUR didn't just say no to the NFL for the drama. He said no because he knows what his brand is worth. And more importantly, he knows what it will be worth years from now if he continues to control it. This is a long game. And most players don't even get to play it because they're too locked into contracts, endorsements, and obligations they didn't understand when they signed. SHEDEUR's doing it differently. He's building wealth, not just cash flow. He's setting a precedent, not just making a point. And he's showing every other athlete watching that they can too. And that's why this moment matters. Because the NFL just got hit with the future, and it wasn't wearing a team jersey, it was wearing a Nike one. And now the league has to respond. Do they evolve? Do they start offering more flexible contracts? Do they begin seeing rookies as business partners instead of liabilities? Or do they double down on the status quo and risk getting left behind? Whatever they choose, the shift has already happened. SHEDEUR Sanders didn't just reject a contract. He triggered a recalibration of power in sports. A challenge to the gatekeeping of legacy institutions. A wake-up call that the next generation of athletes won't be passive participants in their own careers. They want ownership. They want impact. And they want it now, not after 10 years of compliance. And it's not just football. This move is going to echo across basketball, baseball, tennis, soccer. Anywhere talent has been told to wait its turn. It's already happening in music, fashion, film. The creators are claiming their equity. The workers are demanding their worth. SHEDEUR just gave sports the same push. So let's hear it. What do you think? Did SHEDEUR just change the game for good, or did he take one risk too many? Is this the blueprint for athlete empowerment, or an outlier move that only someone with his last name could pull off? Drop your thoughts in the comments, hit like if this got you thinking differently about athlete power, and make sure you're subscribed. We're following every power move, every backlash, and every breakdown, reshaping the culture from the inside out. Because this is just the first quarter. This is bigger than SHEDEUR. It always was. Because the second he rejected that $2 million rookie deal and signed on with Nike for $100 million, the conversation changed, not just about him but about what athletes are allowed to expect from the institutions that profit off them. You could feel it the second the news dropped. The silence from league insiders. The panic behind closed doors. The media split down the middle. Some hailed it as visionary, others rushed to label it dangerous. And all of them knew, this wasn't just another flashy nil story. This was a tectonic shift. SHEDEUR Sanders had just called the NFL's bluff. See, for years the league has functioned on this quiet but deeply embedded principle, that rookies owe the system. That players, especially new ones, are lucky just to be invited in. That the team makes the man. And that any attempt to flip that dynamic is disrespectful, ungrateful, or worst of all, delusional. But SHEDEUR's move said something else entirely. It said, you don't make me. You don't define me. And if your offer doesn't match my value, I have the freedom to walk away. That freedom? That's the revolution. Because most athletes, especially black athletes, have never been afforded that kind of agency. Not without consequences. Not without pushback. Not without being told they're arrogant, entitled, or trying to skip steps. But SHEDEUR didn't skip anything. He built the audience. He built the brand. He built the leverage. And then he exercised it in the most public way possible, at the exact moment the NFL hoped he would play it safe. He knew exactly what he was doing. And so did Nike. Let's not forget, Nike didn't make this move blindly. This isn't some trendy overcorrection in response to nil headlines. This is a calculated investment in someone they see as more than just a player. They see him as a symbol of what's next, of where sports, business, and culture are all converging. And Nike's not wrong. SHEDEUR isn't just an athlete. He's a direct-to-consumer product. He's an algorithm disruptor. He's a marketing campaign that doesn't need ad spend. He gets views. He gets shares. He gets talked about. And that kind of currency? It's worth more than jersey sales. It's not just about talent anymore. It's about presence, visibility, storytelling. And SHEDEUR knows how to tell a story, his story. Not one filtered through a team's PR rep. Not shaped by a commentator. But directly through platforms he controls. That's why his Nike deal is so powerful. It's not just about shoes. It's about co-authorship. And the NFL? They're still stuck thinking like it's 2005. Still pushing the idea that their platform is the pinnacle. Still expecting that athletes will take the deal and be grateful for it, even if it limits them. Even if it makes them smaller. Even if it asks them to give up long-term power for short-term access. But that model is crumbling fast. Because the new generation isn't just watching what happens on game day. They're watching what happens off the field. They're watching who gets paid, how they get paid, and what they have to give up in the process. And when they see SHEDEUR Sanders say no to the contract and yes to control, that opens the door. That sends a message. That proves it can be done. And now the NFL has a problem it can't solve with press releases or commentary panels. Because they can't put this genie back in the bottle. They can't spin it as a fluke. They can't convince players to forget what they just saw. The shift has already happened. And it goes deeper than money. It's about structure. About who gets to shape the terms of an athlete's career. About whether your voice matters only after you've earned a title, or if it matters the second you realize your platform is powerful. And SHEDEUR's platform? It's fully operational. He's got the cultural backing, the brand credibility, the audience, the strategy. He's not waiting for anyone to anoint him. He's moving like he already belongs in the room. Because he does. And that confidence is what breaks people. Because confidence, when it comes from someone expected to follow the rules, reads as arrogance. Especially when that someone is young, unapologetically black, and unwilling to be humble just to make people comfortable. That's why the criticism came fast and furious. He's not proven yet. He needs to focus on football. He hasn't earned this kind of attention. But that's the point, he has earned it. Just not through the channels that traditionally hand out respect. He earned it by being visible, consistent, forward-thinking. He earned it by structuring his image like a business, not a billboard. By recognizing that attention is leverage and leverage is value. And by understanding that a $2 million deal when you already have $100 million worth of influence isn't a blessing, it's a discount. Let's be honest, a lot of players would have taken that deal. Not because they don't believe in themselves, but because the system teaches them that betting on yourself is dangerous, risky, unwise. SHEDEUR said, "I'll take that risk and raise you $98 million. And now the league has to respond. Not with statements but with structural change. Because SHEDEUR just raised the standard. If you want players like him, you're going to have to meet them where they are, not pull them back to where you're comfortable. That means contracts with flexibility, brand collaboration, creative ownership, equity sharing. Not just a salary and some post-game interviews. Because the athletes coming next? They're not just watching, they're planning. They're building content studios. Signing with business-minded agents. Turning NIL deals into multi-year partnerships. And they're walking into the draft room with portfolios, not just playbooks. That's the future. And SHEDEUR is the proof of concept. He's the reminder that waiting your turn only works if there's still value in standing in line. But when you already have a seat at the table, you don't wait for an invite. You show up, set the terms, and if the room can't handle that, you build your own room. And still, the most incredible part of all this? He hasn't even played an NFL snap. SHEDEUR Sanders just dropped a $100 million bombshell on the sports world before ever stepping onto a professional field. And yet somehow he's already commanding more attention, money, and leverage than most veterans ever touch in a decade-long career. Let that sink in. The NFL has long positioned itself as the proving ground. The ultimate destination. The mountain every athlete must climb to validate their worth. But SHEDEUR didn't need the NFL to stamp his value. He validated himself. And in doing so he exposed a truth the league has spent years trying to hide. The players are the product. The platform doesn't matter nearly as much as the person on it. For the NFL this is existential. Because if players like SHEDEUR can generate 9-figure deals independently, before they've played a down, then the league's control over the player pipeline is no longer sacred. The league has spent decades reinforcing the idea that if you want money, exposure, and brand deals, you need the shield. You need the platform. You need the league's blessing. But SHEDEUR didn't wait for that blessing. He didn't ask for permission. He built his own spotlight. He monetized his own name. He created a brand that could survive and thrive outside of traditional channels. And he's showing every young athlete watching that the road to power isn't paved through compliance. It's paved through clarity. Clarity about who you are. Clarity about what you bring. Clarity about what you're not willing to compromise. Let's talk compromise for a second. Because that's what rookie contracts really are. You get drafted. You sign. And in exchange for the shot, you accept the terms. Restricted earnings, strict structure, image control. It's the earn your way up philosophy that's been baked into the NFL's culture from the start. SHEDEUR looked at those terms and walked away. And the moment he did, the NFL felt the shift. Executives who once had complete leverage over rookie negotiations suddenly found themselves wondering, what happens if this becomes normal? What happens when college athletes start negotiating like venture capitalists instead of wide-eyed prospects? We're talking equity clauses, branding autonomy, creative input, multi-platform strategies. These are tools athletes used to access only after making it big. Now, they're asking for them on day one. And SHEDEUR didn't just ask, he secured them. His Gatorade deal already showed us that he's not in this for surface-level endorsements. He wants stakes, ownership, residual income that scales with success. And that Gatorade move? That was just the warm-up. Nike brought the main event. $100 million. Not in retirement. Not in hindsight. Right now. And still you've got people questioning whether he deserves it. Funny how deserve always enters the chat when a black athlete moves like a businessman. The criticism hasn't been subtle. The media split has been stark. One side celebrates SHEDEUR for changing the landscape. The other questions his humility, focus, and priorities. But let's ask this. Would we even be having this conversation if a white quarterback with a famous last name and media-ready charm did the same thing? If someone like Arch Manning turned down a modest contract and landed a 9-figure brand deal, would the word entitled even appear in the coverage? Or would he be called savvy? Visionary? A student of the game? Because that's what SHEDEUR is. But with the added challenge of pushing back against decades of coded language double standards and institutional discomfort with black athletes who own themselves. That's what this is really about. Ownership. Not just in the literal equity-based sense, but in the broader sense. Ownership of brand, of career, of public perception. SHEDEUR is redefining what it means to be a rookie. Not just an athlete trying to earn a role, but an asset walking in with leverage, awareness, and options. And that's a threat to every institution that thrives on keeping players in line by limiting those options. What do you do with a player who can say no? What do you do with a rookie who doesn't need your validation? That's what's shaking the system. And you can hear it in the way the NFL has responded, with silence. Because any attempt to challenge SHEDEUR publicly would backfire. They'd look petty, defensive, out of touch. So instead they say nothing. Let the media debate it. Let the fans argue. Let the dust settle while they frantically regroup behind the scenes. But they know. The precedent is set. And now, every top-tier college athlete entering the league is going to ask a different set of questions. What am I really getting with this rookie contract? What am I giving up? What can I negotiate for instead? That's the impact of SHEDEUR's decision. Not just on the NFL, but on everyone watching. Every high school star. Every college standout. Every kid building a social media following and wondering if it could mean something more. This moment is for them. Because SHEDEUR didn't just flip a contract, he flipped the mentality. He showed that your value isn't tied to a draft number. That you can be a first-round brand with or without the commissioner calling your name. That waiting for someone else to pick you is optional. And that message? It's unstoppable. It won't be long before we see other players follow suit. Maybe not at the same scale. But the mentality is already spreading. The NFL's days of unchecked rookie leverage are numbered. Because players are waking up. They're building platforms. They're learning the business. And SHEDEUR? He just made it cool to say no. Cool to negotiate. Cool to think long-term. Cool to be in the room with CEOs before you're in the locker room with veterans. And whether or not his NFL career becomes legendary is beside the point. Because what he's done already is bigger than stats or trophies. He reframed the game. He reframed the system. He reframed possibility. The NFL has always operated like it's the only show in town. And for a long time it was. It could hand you a contract, slap a logo on your chest and expect you to fall in line. The league was the gatekeeper, of opportunity, of fame, of money. But SHEDEUR Sanders just walked straight past that gate and said, "Actually, I'll build my own." And the league felt it. Not with a headline. Not with a press conference. But with panic. Quiet panic. Backroom meetings. PR teams whispering about how to handle the narrative. Because when a top prospect says no, not because he's scared, not because he's injured, but because the offer just isn't worth his brand, you know something fundamental has changed. And SHEDEUR's not backing down. He's already proven he knows what he's doing. The Nike deal wasn't just record-breaking, it was strategic. It signaled that he's not waiting to earn a stake in the sports economy. He's taking it. Not later. No. Before a single NFL snap. Before the cameras start rolling on Sundays. Before the league gets a chance to shape his story. Because that's what this has always been about. Who controls the story? And for years the league had that power. They'd draft you, build your image, control your interviews, and decide when you were marketable. But SHEDEUR? He already is marketable. He already is a story. A quarterback, yes, but also a businessman. A cultural figure. Someone who's not just being sold, but doing the selling. That's a different kind of power. One that doesn't need the league to legitimize it. One that doesn't rely on traditional success metrics to cash out. And that power? It's contagious. You can already feel the ripple effect. Young athletes are watching this go down and realizing they don't have to play small. They don't have to beg for scraps or hope for a highlight reel. If they build their brand, nurture their audience, and protect their value, they can walk into any room with leverage. That's what SHEDEUR has done. And whether the league likes it or not, this is the future. So the real question isn't whether SHEDEUR will succeed. It's whether the NFL can keep up. Because if it doesn't, if it keeps treating rookies like risks instead of partners, if it keeps underestimating players who walk in with influence already intact, it won't just lose one SHEDEUR. It'll lose a whole generation of them. Let us know what you think below. Did SHEDEUR just make the most strategic power move of the decade, or is this a sign of something even bigger? Hit like if you're watching the old systems fall apart, and subscribe for more breakdowns as the chaos unfolds. Because this isn't just about football anymore. This is about who really gets to win.